there are a lot of actual lesbian issues that the BBC will never give a voice to. They
Hmm.
do not care. They do not care about lesbian rights. They do not care about lesbian issues unless they can use it as a tool to attack what they see as invading homosexuality with straight people, like straight people invading something. And
Yeah.
it's like that they'll do the occasional piece of isn't this one person brave. When the trans pride march happened in London, they did a little puff piece on the organizer of that. I remember a while ago they did like a Newsbeat article on LGBT students in general, and they gave like one trans person a single paragraph, and they'll say, "Oh, look how balanced we are because we did that along with a 800-word hate
Yeah.
piece."
Yeah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Simply Jocelyn, or NJ4K, as other people might know. And it's been a rough 24 hours for the trans community. Well, I would say a rough week for the trans community. But in the last 24 hours, my God, it has been an adventure to say the least. And so I've been looking into the history and the background, and found Miss Nova here. I'm sorry, names again. I apologize.
Mariah.
Mariah here, who runs the channel. I'm just going to double check because I'm terrible with names. I apologize. I came prepared. I usually come prepared. Okay, Maria Scary on Twitter.
That's just like my Halloween Twitter name.
Oh, it's a great name. It's a great name. But I will give you links to her channel and her tremendous video in the bar below. It was a very good. In fact, to be honest with you, it was one of the first I actually saw from a lesbian point of view on the whole subject. Previously, it was hour-long people of trans people like myself who were very concerned about what was going on over there. But to have your video out there was a breath of fresh air. So would you like to introduce yourself? And then we'll go on that.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mariah. I do a little YouTube channel. I made the name up on the spot. It's Mars Nova. I occasionally upload topics I care about. My first video was on lesbophobia within the drag race community and show, and the inherent transphobia within that. Then I did some smaller videos just on like a little passion project. The latest one I'm really happy with is I did a really, really long video on the catharsis and feminism of rape revenge movies and how that ties into the survivor's experience of recovery. And I was pretty much like so angry at this BBC article that I just had to put something out. And I've only done like 2 videos on like current topics, but because I don't really like doing them because they sort of feel like they get outdated fast and they get very irrelevant fast. And then when people search them, it's just for discourse reasons. And I it's not something you can stay silent on at all.
No, I'm pretty much the same. A lot of my YouTube videos, I do reviews on my channel mainly, but I tend not to do what's current for exactly the same reasons you do. It just seems to get buried in the deluge of everybody else doing it. So
it feels like every time I try to do something that's not current, it becomes current. My next video is going to be on how DC Comics destroyed the character of Batwoman. And as soon as I started it, the whole drama about CW trying to silence Ruby Rose about set conditions came out. So now I have to add all that into it.
Oh, good grief. It just never gets tired.
No.
It's old. It gets tiring, but it never gets old, you know. So yeah, that'll definitely, that's definitely one people, a lot of my geek audience would definitely watch. So let us know about that, and I will make sure people get to see that as well. So
brilliant. Thank you.
So yeah, by all means, please check her out and do subscribe to her channel. But what we want to focus on right now is your recent take on the BBC article on your channel, which it was a very it was a breath of fresh air for trans people. Actually, to actually see, we've seen lots of commentary from lesbians, more on Twitter and on Facebook with the cis with the T. CisWithTheT
Yeah.
hashtag going on. But we didn't actually see a lot of input from the lesbian community or from individual lesbians as a whole. So your video to somebody like me was a complete breath of fresh air. And there was a lot to unpack. It was just amazing that you managed to keep it into a 15-minute vibe, especially with regards to how much the article covered. So I would like you to kind of repeat some of those points here today, how you as a lesbian felt about the article itself.
Yeah, so I think there is very much an issue with not giving, not many lesbians are platformed in this way. When the media tends to platform lesbians, it's from a very cis-normative point of view. It's often heterosexual people going, oh, how, lesbians are being forced into having sex with trans women, like that. It's from an outside perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody actually asked many lesbians. And
or many ordained lesbians.
yeah,
Let's be honest, right?
yeah. Or even as like I said in the video, their 80-person sample size was sent to women's groups. So chances are it was not all lesbians.
Yeah. Also, within the was it Get the L Out? I think it was.
Yeah. So I think it's very much a generational divide. Like, the lesbian community has often been seen as there was a period of time where if you were a woman in a relationship with a woman, you were a lesbian. It didn't matter if you were bisexual.
Yeah.
And that led to a lot of bisexual erasure and a lot of lesbian whitewashing and erasure. And now we see with more increased visibility, both bisexual and lesbian visibility, we push back against this. Like, my girlfriend is bisexual, and when we go out, I'm like, and some whoever references it, I'm like, no, my girlfriend is bisexual.
Yeah.
And it's something you have to kind of push back, you do have to push back against. But for years, especially from straight people, lesbian is just seen as the option, especially a choice that people make if they don't want a certain type of genitals. And that's something that political lesbians who are historically straight or bisexual women who want to distance themselves from men and politically call them they see lesbianism as an act of radical feminism. And that has been, in my opinion at least, the single biggest source of lesbian erasure. And guess who the BBC are giving attention to?
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that. It's like when I watch a lot of especially with a lot of the BBC TV shows. Sometimes I watch a lot of shows where they include lesbian characters in there, but they seem to be so militant about how they feel about men, for example. And
yeah, I used a clip that ContraPoints put in, and she was like, lesbians don't actually think about men that much. We just don't like them. It's fine. If somebody actively hates men, it's not because they're a lesbian. It's because of either they're projecting victimization, or they're a rad femme, or just a man hater.
So in many ways, you take the stance that I do, that lesbianism has been weaponized for, not just against trans people, but it almost seems like a weapon against almost, and I'm not going to say the patriarchy, because I think that in itself, that could mean a lot of things.
I think it's an attempt at weaponizing it against the patriarchy.
Yeah.
The issue that you get is, so for example, within the radical feminist movement, You saw a lot of co-opting of lesbianism in general. Um, like you would see people say, "Oh, I choose to call myself a lesbian because I'm no longer going to date a man. I just, I hate them. I'm sick of them."
Mm,
And everything. It's not an actual sexuality. It's seen as a choice. And I covered this in my rape revenge video slightly, I think. I'm trying to think if I ended up cutting it out. But
mm,
Julie Bindel especially like calls herself a lesbian voice.
mhm,
But she is frankly just a genital fetishist. She just hates penises. And
mm.
that's all, like that is all she does. And I am perfectly happy calling her a political lesbian. That the British media are perfectly happy to platform while never hearing any inclusive lesbian voices.
Well, it seems that way. I've noticed a lot. I mean, I'm old enough to remember page three.
Yeah.
And how sexy it was that that the pastry girl was was into girls, and that was, and apparently on deeper examination, that was because it was a media point. It wasn't
Yeah.
a point, a point of interest in the human being herself. It was just basically, oh, she's into girls, and
Yeah.
I've seen an evolution with that from it's become the sexual thing, then to some women just trying to claim it as as a thing of power, where really all sexuality should be is who you are,
Yeah.
who you are
I
attracted to.
I touch on that
Yeah.
especially as I say, lesbianism is how I relate to gender
No.
as well, and it upsets me when people draw the line that lesbians are cis women who are attracted to. Some people don't include the cis before that, or
Yeah.
just lesbians are women who are attracted to women. When we have had so many, and like these are people who are fundamental to our understanding of lesbianism, who are non-binary. They have always related their sexuality to their gender and their roles within that, and it's a lot. There's very much like a cis normative whitewashing that we get when um media outlets, especially in the UK, platform cis women who believe this. They, for example, there was a big push against the labels of butch and femme,
Hmm.
and it was
Oh, I
very
remember
much,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it was very much a radical feminist idea of this is heteronormativity, we shouldn't do it anymore, we should shame anybody who calls themselves butches and femmes. And what it really is, it's a relation to your gender identity. Like if I could fill out lesbian on a little other on the gender, I would. And it's it's difficult to talk about that, especially in left-leaning spaces, because I find there is a lot of stigma around talking about actual lesbian issues, because people will assume that you will then go into radical feminism because that well is so well poisoned.
Yeah, yeah. So, how do you think it's affected you personally as a lesbian woman? All of it. How do you think it's affected you personally? How has it affected your relationships with
Yeah.
other women?
I think I realized I was a lesbian really young. I was actually, this is an incredibly millennial thing to say,
Mm-hmm.
which is that my mom, I didn't come out. My mom walked into my bedroom in the middle of the night and went, "Are you gay?" Because she saw me playing The Sims with two girls.
There we
I was
go.
like, I was like, I don't want a man in my Sims house.
Yeah. That works for me. That works for me.
Yeah, and since then, so I never truly got like an experience of being closeted to an extent, because despite being feminine, I was quite a tomboy child. And a lot of people just basically guessed. The
Mm.
one issue that I had is that members of my family are Scientologists, and they basically cut me off completely
I know how that feels.
when my mom mentioned it. And so they tried to have me audited, and yelled at me when I tried to hang the phone up on them. And now none of them have ever talked to me since, which is upsetting. But
Mm,
it's one it's one of those things where it's an incredibly isolating experience, not just from straight people, cis people especially, but also like within your own community.
mhm,
I think like so much of queer culture is shaped towards gay men, especially,
mhm,
and like lesbian bars are disappearing. Like there was quite a hot take that was had last year where a famous lesbian bar in New York, they had a fundraiser to like keep them going, and
mhm.
they rallied together like the lesbian community. All these lesbians donated for their favorite place, and when they reopened they said, no, we're a queer bar now, we don't want to call ourselves a lesbian bar. And it's like, that was like one place that people
Yeah.
have to feel like themselves.
So, I mean, how do you feel? I mean, this has been an issue of contention, due largely, in fact, to the LGBT alliance. Thankfully,
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, your girlfriend is bisexual.
Hmm.
Um, so obviously, if you took her to a lesbian bar and you have this attitude against, this bi erasure going on, which is again actively encouraged by the LGBT alliance. How do you feel about that? I mean, it almost makes you feel that, yeah, you yourself are feeling your own form of isolation thanks to this politicalization
Yeah.
of your sexuality, and then you got your girlfriend who's bisexual, who herself is experienced that kind of erasure from this group that supposedly says it's
Yeah.
on your side.
Yeah, I think so. We have seen that so many members of the LGBT alliance are actually just straight people, and especially straight men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's if you look at the
Oh God, yeah.
conference, there's so many bald heads.
I mean, who knows more about lesbian women than straight men? Let's
Yeah,
be
Graham
honest.
Linehan, defender of lesbians.
Yeah. Gee, Jesus Christ. Forgive me. I'm just all over the place with that. I mean, it just kind of blows my mind that 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 some of the actual lesbian and gay people in the LGBT community just can't see the wood between in the trees. Um, no offense to them. I'm not trying to say that they're stupid or anything like that, but I've
Yeah.
seen how cults work. This is literally a cult system which is designed to destroy the LGBT community as a whole,
Yeah.
and they don't see it.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating.
Mm,
Again, it's very much like again a very generational divide. Like a
mhm.
lot of older cis people will see any sort of change as an oppression to them as a person.
Yeah,
And I think especially when it comes to the LGBT alliance, they tend to weaponize how they're perceived. For example, the BBC in their quest for unbiased and
mhm.
balanced reporting will take mermaids off of their list of recommended charities and give puff pieces to the LGBT alliance.
Yeah, yeah. Especially considering that, no, I think not 3 years ago, one of their spokesperson, Graham Linehan, I mean, I use it as an example a lot. Literally said the reason you see the rise in trans violence is because we're not allowed to say that
Yeah,
trans women are
I
men. That's a justification. You are literally
yeah.
giving a platform for this guy justifying violence against trans people. You didn't challenge him. You just cut the interview off when he started going in there. There was no
Yeah.
challenge to that stance. He literally said, "This is going up because I can't say that they're a man." And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not a just, what?
I think like especially like the BBC has that issue with media portrayals of conflicting opinions where because they give quote unquote equal weight to one side or the other, it is very much like one side is let me live and the other side is I want you to die.
Yeah, and as far as they're concerned, so you, you you can't think of a problem you have with the guy who wants to kill you. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever. It's really like that. So yeah, the article itself was, I studied Medium a lot, and I know how headlines go. It's kind of 4 out of 10. I remember back in the day, the Sun newspaper said 4 out of 10 black people end up in jail. That was that was a Sun article, but and that was supposed to be a shocking revelation. Not 6 out of not 6 out of 10 managed to avoid it. No, it was just that 4 out of 10. So this some trans people pressure
Does a lot of heavy
lesbians.
lifting, that word,
It's
doesn't it?
it's a lot of heavy lifting in that word. You could almost put it in almost any context. Some straight men pressure women to have sex with them. Some lesbians actually pressure other lesbians to have sex. We know this. This is nothing new. It's just that you decided that, oh, let's pick on the trans people these days, because picking on lesbians or picking on people who send PMs in the send PMs to lesbian girls saying I can make you straight isn't newsworthy. And
yeah, I think so I was saying that in my video a lot, is there are a lot of actual lesbian issues that the BBC will never give a voice to. They do not care. They do not care about lesbian rights. They do not care about lesbian issues unless they can use it as a tool to attack what they see as invading homosexuality with straight people, like straight people invading something. And it's like that they'll do the occasional piece of, isn't this one person brave? When the Trans Pride March happened in London, they did a little puff piece on the organizer of that. I remember a while ago they did like a Newsbeat article on LGBT students in general, and they gave like one trans person a single paragraph. And they'll say, "Oh, look how balanced we are because we did that along with a 800-word hate piece."
Yeah. So I just woke up, as you already know. So you told me some interesting news on the BBC article. Could you remind the audience of that, so I'm not getting it wrong? Then I'll put my piece on that.
Yeah, in fact, I'll have a quick check to make sure I'm not misquoting it.
Okay, that's fine. We're journalists. We have to be prepared.
So basically, as of today, they have removed reference and name of Lily Cade from the article. They haven't changed the article in any actual meaningful way. They just said, let's see, we have updated this article published last week to remove a contribution from one individual in light of comments she has published on blog posts in recent days, which we have been able to verify. We acknowledge that an admission of inappropriate behavior by the same contributor should have been included in the original article. That is a reference to her being a rapist.
Yeah, it's a rape. Not only a rape, but it's also very. They're still denying the actual lack of journalistic ethics that they claim they have. Remember how they said that not one trans person was willing to talk to them on the other side.
Yeah,
Chelsea Poe literally did and told them about her history. This was an article, I remind my audience, well, that was a year in the making.
Supposedly, yeah, she had been seeking sources and writing this for a year, and it reads like fan fiction. Like, it's ridiculous. It's like, to even like if you even searched like Lily Cade on Twitter or anything like that, you would see her accusations. You would not, you could not Google this person without seeing the controversy around them.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I mean, honestly, I didn't know who Lily Cade was up until now, and it kind of brings me back to the issue. It's quite nicely, actually, as we're about to talk about Lily Cade and Rose of Dawn in a minute. But strikes me that this isn't a coincidence that this comes up in the shadow of Dave Chappelle. Would you agree with that?
No, I think very much the BBC saw the writing on the wall and saw what they could get away with. I think it was
Mm,
very much a case of she hasn't been writing this for a year. It was probably written a long time ago,
hmm
and they've just been sitting on it. And I said this in my video as well, where it's an attempt to stoke up fear from
hmm
women and hate, because they've also published this in the aftermath of women feeling unsafe in Britain. We've had obviously our high profile case of
The
the murder of
stabbing
Sarah
of a
Everard.
woman by a police officer, if I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, so he used his police powers to falsely arrest her, um, and then raped and murdered her.
And apparently
And
that was trans people's fault for some reason.
they did try and blame it on trans people. They said, "Oh, once I saw the look in his face, I knew he was going to claim to be trans." Didn't happen though, did it?
No, it didn't happen. No, it was like over here about I think 3 months ago in California, a teacher raped a 14-year-old boy, and they were insisting that she was trans.
Yeah,
Despite the
and
fact that,
not.
despite the fact that friends and family were saying no,
Yeah,
she is not trans. And they were
yeah,
still insisting it. You know, there was an incident in Canada where a man was supposedly arrested for dead naming their child. It turned out that what he was actually doing was stalking this child and
yeah,
her mother's doctor. He was doing a lot, he was stalking them, stalking the doctor, trying to get private information out there, trying to dox them, all this crap. It's an
yeah.
invention at the end of the day. They see something that is so far removed from the trans issue as they can get, and they somehow manage to find a way to make it fit. It's
Yeah.
I think
Well, it's pure, like, just again, it's that weaponized hatred of men,
yeah.
where a lot of as- feminists in the UK, I feel like it's partially a reaction to just how cis-normative the UK is. Like, it's a very much like men are men country, and so to have a sort of reaction against the patriarchy, a lot of cis-normative people will see that as everybody I see as a man is violent, and every
Mm,
violent person I see is a man.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
It's it's so for example, Wayne Couzens, as I mentioned, he actually sexually assaulted a drag performer. And you don't see that mentioned anywhere.
no,
And same with Graham Linehan harassing lesbians on her, screenshotting people's profiles. None of them talk about that. None of them actually like to talk about an actual person who identifies as a man invading women's spaces.
so let's put our conspiratorial hat on for a
Oh,
moment.
good.
Okay, all right. I mean, we recently saw that Boris Johnson praised the LGBT community in a letter, I believe. At least that's what I've heard. I'm trying to find the letter itself. I know it's
I was
around
about to say,
some.
I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can't help but feel that there is some kind of active pressure by the BBC, which is supposedly an independent from the government, despite the fact that this chairman is decided by the government. Um, I can't help but feel that there is a systematic attempt to push Stonewall out of governmental circles by the government, and the BBC is kind of like a tool to that. Do you get that impression over there? Do you?
Absolutely. Especially Boris Johnson and the current Conservative government.
Hmm,
Um, Boris Johnson is kind of notorious for when he was a journalist. He called gay men slurs. He loved using the very, very loadedly homophobic phrase in the UK, rent boy.
yeah,
And he called Muslim women post boxes,
post
and we
boxes.
still
Yeah,
elected this man to our highest office.
to this day, I will never understand how that happens. But then again, I live in the United States, so yeah,
Yeah, it's.
yeah.
I'll never understand how this happens, and it just
It's
keeps
it's it's
happening
just
over and over.
it's just like It was like, we elected Donald Trump. I bet you can't beat us now, you know. And there's Britain going, hold my beer. We got Brexit.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll
Mojo.
elect Boris Johnson and we'll do Brexit, and then hold our beer as we decimate journalistic integrity.
I mean, you must be extremely thankful for Channel 4 News sometimes, because Channel 4 News seems to handle this a hell of a lot better than the BBC does, I've noticed. They've handled Brexit pretty well balanced, I believe. It was pretty clear where they stood, but they still handled it very well. And recently, what impressed me most was when they interviewed a trans woman on why trans rights are human rights. You wouldn't see that on the BBC. I mean,
actually, interestingly, I want to point out how recent this phenomena of the BBC being explicitly transphobic is that in the 70s, I believe it was the BBC. I may be misspeaking here. I assume every TV footage I see from the 70s is from the BBC. There was, I think it was a Women's Hour equivalent, where they basically just had a solid hour of trans women.
Sorry, I'm a little
talking about their trans women talking about their experiences, and like there was no criticism, there were no other viewpoints presented. It was just trans women on television speaking about their experiences. And for the life of me, I cannot find that because I wanted to use it in my video and I couldn't find the footage.
I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere where we will find it. So basically, this is a completely new phenomena for you then.
It's been escalating. So I originally, like when I started my channel, I made like a checklist of topics I would sort of like to cover. And right at the top of the list was the BBC's transphobia bias. And it's again with this, they've been attacking Stonewall, they've been attacking mermaids, they've been covering cases of trans rights in an incredibly disingenuous way. How much media attention they gave Keira Bell versus anybody who actually supported children's trans services. So for example, they would cover the Keira Bell case. I think they even put out like a breaking alert for it. When the hell I got, and I was like, oh. And you see these presented as this is fact, and here is a statement that we're not presenting as the BBC's opinion. Yeah, and that's what this article was essentially.
So in short, so in short, most of their articles are almost better than this piece, because when they said they didn't interview that no trans person would come to them, Chelsea Poe comes, and she actually did. This again just kind of like shows that the BBC does have an agenda. It has gone into Fox News territory at this point.
The way that British media operates is silence is a statement.
Yeah.
Like, if the BBC doesn't want to talk about this criticism of it, despite how obviously wildly controversial it is, they just don't talk about it. There is no coverage of this specific week in television in general, aside from like vague corrections on the article that call rape. What was the phrase? Let me just have a quick check.
Oh God, yeah.
It was inappropriate behavior. That inappropriate behavior known as rape.
I'm sorry, I just noticed I hadn't had my headphones plugged in. My God. I have to apologize to my audience. I've been tardy today. My alarm went off at 9 o'clock and I arrived at this meeting 5 minutes late. So blame me, okay?
All right, I was 5 minutes not ready anyway.
So if you have been hearing an echo in this, I apologize. But anyway, yeah, where were we? Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of shocking when you think about it. Do you think there's a difference between BBC Entertainment and BBC News? Because BBC Entertainment with Doctor Who, for example, seems to be very strongly okay with the LGBT community. And then you have the BBC News, which isn't.
Yeah. I think especially like the BBC likes to put up a sort of front of progressivism. They will fund progressive like television shows and things like that, like all of the documentaries that tend to come out, aside from that big hit piece on Stonewall,
Hmm.
tend to be sort of balanced, especially in previous years. But they have pretty much made it clear where they're drawing the line in terms of
Hmm.
human rights.
Yes. So let's move on a little. I still want to keep him um, with Lily Cade here. Obviously, I don't know if you've read her manifesto.
I have. It's extremely depressing, and the fact
Hmm.
that I think we're up to like three media outlets that have talked about it in the UK is
Yeah,
honestly disgusting.
it's
So, like,
pretty
I just want to
telling. Yeah.
highlight my, when I say favorite, I mean my absolute least favorite parts of it.
Hmm.
Is she explicitly gives mention to the Great Replacement conspiracy theory.
Hmm.
She says gay marriage was a mistake. She says that Jazz Jennings' mother should be gang raped, which
Oh my
was
goodness.
possibly the worst part of it. And I just can't fathom what's going through her mind. I'm sure she's going through a mental health crisis in a way, but it's never an excuse.
It's never an excuse for that. No, I mean, if anybody, I mean, she needs help. There's no denying that, because nobody in their right mind writes shit like that
Yeah, I
these
also
days.
did see that. I
Mhm.
saw this on a Twitter thread, and there was a photo to verify it.
Mhm.
Is that she at one point was trans inclusive? Somebody posted saying that she had matched with her on Tinder and hung out with her as a trans woman, and that she wasn't shocked at the accusations because she found her to be sexually aggressive to other women at the bar.
Yeah, yeah. There seemed to be this kind of possessiveness. There was one story I heard when they were doing an orgy scene, and she literally be beating up the guys who tried to get involved. It's a bisexual orgy scene,
Mm,
but she was so possessive. It's almost like uh, yeah. There's definitely the problem I have with, I mean, I don't get me wrong, I have nothing against the porn industry as a whole, but
mm-hmm.
I have a problem with the male domination of the porn industry, obviously. But there doesn't seem to be a check and balance to people who may have sexually orientated
Yeah,
mental diseases, if you can, and it's very clear that Lily Cade has that problem with sexual possessiveness,
yeah.
which
I
so.
think it is often a problem that you see, especially among people who make pornography their career,
Mhm.
is that not the career itself, but often same as Hollywood, is many allowances are given to people who are willing to abuse people. We
Yeah.
saw this with James Dean, who was touted
Mhm.
as the most feminist male porn star alive, I believe.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with his work, but
neither am I, to be honest with you.
and he had a Me Too where all of these actresses who had acted with him basically pointed to their videos and said, "He raped me in this."
Yeah,
And
I mean, I
I
remember the
don't know if
stories.
you
Yeah,
have videos now, but
yeah,
yeah, I don't know if he still gets work. But again, it's like any culture, but obviously the stakes are higher because you have that access to people's bodies, I would assume.
yeah. It's kind of like the porn industry doesn't have that check and balance, because I'm going to be blunt. To a lot of people who run the porn industry, rape isn't an issue for them. So we don't care,
Yeah,
as long as we got the product. So we have this sexually aggressive woman who quite clearly has a problem with sexual possessiveness, but it doesn't matter. She's a sex maniac. That's all we need for art. That's all we need to sell. And that's really sad. The porn industry is a good thing. I support it. I mean, I was, I was with the OnlyFans performers and stuff like that, because I feel that that if a woman is in charge of her own content, the safer it is for them.
Yeah. So when I grew up, there were a few years of my life where me and my mother were nearly homeless,
Mm,
and we ended up living with a friend that my mom had rekindled an old friendship with,
mm-hmm,
and she was a street sex worker. And
mm-hmm,
so we then went from a situation where we were worried about not being able to pay the rent to being quite comfortable with it because we were sharing. But
mm-hmm.
the caveat was that I couldn't go downstairs after 7 p.m.
Yeah,
So it's,
which
yeah, it's a bit, it's mostly a case of male domination
mm-hmm,
and sort of catering to men through,
mm-hmm,
and like, so I would never say any of the, like, the women involved, except for obviously case of actual predators, the
yeah,
women actually involved in sex work are never to blame for the situations in it,
mm-hmm,
especially the
mm-hmm,
victims of it. But I think, like all industries, they can have their own way of promoting harm to people. And
yeah.
especially growing up, it was quite normalized for me to
Mm.
see her come home scared after running for her life.
I am sorry. I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay.
About last month I was raped. So
I'm
it's
sorry to hear
yeah,
that.
it's still. So when I read Lily Cade, I went through Lily. I literally had to smoke several cigarettes up, during and both after that, because it's quite a PTSD moment. But I still
Yeah.
think it's an important thing to point out. You know,
It's so frustrating as well because trans women are so much more likely than a lot of other female demographics to be victims of sexual violence.
yeah.
And that is never, like, when are the BBC publishing their article on that?
Mm, absolutely not. I mean, I seem to recall a study from shelters saying, from female women's shelters, they don't have this problem. They don't have the problem where a male has pretended to be a woman to get close to another
Yeah.
woman. They haven't had that problem. In fact, their major problem has been, and I will post it in a box whilst we're talking here, where they literally say that the major problem had been from cis women attacking
Yeah.
other cis women in women's shelters. Their problem has never been one of genitalia, and it gets back to to your original point. Lesbians, in your experience, really don't give a damn about what's between a woman's legs.
Yeah, it's like I'm attracted to women if, so I think there's an element of when you grow up as a lesbian, often by the straight people around you, you are told, oh, you don't like dick. And I was like, oh, well, I never really thought about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't like dick because when I look at men
yeah,
before obviously going out into the world and actually learning who, like, trans people are, and meeting trans friends, they don't come into the equation. When people say you don't like dick, they I reacted to that as a teenager and went, yeah, because that's what's on men. And
yeah.
I don't like men. And so there is, like, that sort of normalization of it, and it's not from the lesbian community a lot of the time. It's, or even like most of the time, I would argue, it's sitting around and discusses genitals.
No, it's like it's kind of sad that the turf element of the lesbian community have actually co-opted "we don't
Yeah.
like dick," and I'm like, but that's not what being gay is
Yeah.
about. It's not about.
It feels like
Yeah,
another version of when
mm,
straight guys say, why, why would you use a strap on?
yeah. I mean,
I'm like, no, it's you I don't want to have sex with. I don't care
yeah,
what else is
yeah.
involved.
I remember my family, sadly disowned by the rest of the family, like myself. He's gay, happily married to a woman, but still gay. He loves his partner, but he's still gay. And then the way this relationship works is they don't care about what's between the legs, and they're pretty much asexual when it comes down to it. Asexual when it comes down to their relationship anyway. So, and I said, how does this work? You know, I thought you didn't like women. I said, never said I didn't like women. I said I wasn't sexually attracted to women. I love this woman. There's a difference. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
strange to me. I don't understand it, but at the
Yeah, I
same
think
time, it's there.
I think the split attraction model tends
Yeah,
to be I don't see its usefulness in people who aren't
no,
asexual. But
no.
obviously when it comes to asexual people, like that line is there quite
I'm not.
easily.
I'm like, if you're not having sex, it's kind of not a big deal. Who you know, if you're attracted to a man or a woman, you know, there's a strange, you know, there's a strange level of strange is probably the wrong word. It's a whole level of genders and sexualities, and I think
Yeah.
what it stems down to is that we just want things to stay constant. I think as humanity, you know, which is kind of strange because everything changes in our lives. You know, our technology changes, the way our lives changes, COVID changes everything. But we still want to have that comfort zone where everything is the same. The L means something, the B means something, the G means something. Well, maybe not the B because the B kind of threatens the L and the G, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that like it's often not the community that are drawing those lines. It tends to be like people often outside perceptions of
Yeah.
it.
Mm,
Again, like this whole the subtext within the line lesbians are being forced to have sex with trans women
hmm
is there are lesbians and there are trans people. They can never intersect.
mm.
Like that's what they
My
meant by
wife,
that.
my wife might have a thing or two to say about that, but okay.
Like yeah, you can
Yeah.
never you can I quite like I quite like when I'm
Mm,
talking to a cis person and they've just never considered it. Like it's just something that they have never considered. And
yeah.
so with the rise of progressive talking points that they see in media, it's very much just a reactionary response to it of, oh, don't like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think that's the problem. You know, it's kind of like the ooh factor is not enough for me to say something's wrong, and I think that's the problem. The LGBTQ alliance is basically the ooh factor made into a charity.
Yeah.
If I'm making any sense with that. Um, trying to be aware of time because I know it's getting late over there. So back to the Cade and Rose of Dawn statement. I don't know if you've read that.
So I'm
Mm,
sort of like semi familiar with Rose of Dawn in that I keep like seeing her takes and I'm aware of her channel.
yeah,
Um, but I have just willingly chosen to never interact with it.
it's very advisable. The problem with YouTube's algorithm is that it's pretty much like BBC in many ways. It's given trans medicalism uh, a huge boost thanks to
Yeah,
Blair
you can
White.
put a thumbnail on anything, and all
Yeah,
of a sudden, thousands of teenagers on their right wing.
yeah. So anyway, this is Rose of Dawn's statement, as you already know, was already in the article on the Lily Cade situation.
Mhm.
She said the following two statements can be
Yeah,
true at the same time. One, Lily Cade is unhinged to call for the deaths of trans women and has also faced accusations of sexual assault. Accusations of sexual assault. These accusations go back as far as 2017. I think we've passed the accusation point at this point.
yeah,
Some lesbians have faced pressure to date trans women under the threat of being labeled bigots. This isn't news. This is not news. Okay, I don't understand why this is even a BBC article, but fine.
yeah. I also
Yeah,
don't think that the so I feel like the first part of that is true.
yeah,
I think like yeah, in again, some is
exactly.
doing a lot of heavy lifting in that.
Yeah,
It's like if I said some cis lesbians are I don't even know how to finish that sentence. But you can say like some within anything, some certain races are more likely to be criminalized.
yeah.
And it's a very leading sentiment.
It's a very
And
leading
yeah,
thing. Yeah,
some trans women have pressured lesbians into sex.
But
Some lesbians have pressured lesbians into sex.
but you
Some bi
personally,
women have pressured lesbians into sex.
but you personally haven't been pressured into sex by a trans person
I've
from the
never been
video.
pressured into sex by a trans woman. I have been pressured into sex by bi women, straight women, and other lesbians
I mean, that's not to
who are
say.
all cis.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that other lesbians haven't had that experience,
Yeah,
but
it's it's very much a case of
mm,
framing it like this phrase inherently implies it's an epidemic.
yeah,
Framing it like this is and giving light to it, and so it then becomes a not a true case of the actual epidemic that is happening of corrective rape within lesbians, especially in some African countries.
hmm
But they'll give casual mention to that, but they'll tout out this article, which is literally just some women sexually pressure other women,
yeah,
and it's frustrating to hear that, because most of the people in that article, there were, I think, so there was Lily Cade, who actually did not cite ever being pressured into having sex.
yes, that I
She
noticed. Yeah,
insulted someone's genitals, and she insulted someone's genitals in quite a grotesque way.
hmm
And then when people said, "Why are you insulting somebody's genitals in quite a grotesque way?" she went, "I am being oppressed." She quite consensually turned down the experience, and nobody said, "You have to have sex with me."
yeah,
One of the other cases was literally a cis woman being pressured by another cis woman to have a threesome.
and it was the cis
And
woman doing the pressuring. Yeah,
yeah, there was a trans person involved, but it's not, they explicitly said that,
mm.
they weren't involved in it.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Lily Cade thing was one that stood out for me more. Is that she said no, and that was the end of the
Yeah.
discussion. That was all I
Yeah, it
saw.
was, yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I know that there was probably one incident where, in the article, where the cis woman did feel pressurized directly by a trans woman. She was
I
unnamed,
I
but
think there was the unnamed one, and there was also a case which wasn't a woman saying that she was pressurized. It's that she had heard from people who were pressured,
yeah, exactly.
and that's
So,
just third-hand information that's being reported.
so I mean, so here's the disclaimer. We're not saying it doesn't happen. We're saying that this article didn't provide evidence that it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying.
I also think, again, it's very much the framing of it. Like,
Yeah.
when we say this doesn't happen, they will then go, "So you're saying that these women are liars?"
Yeah.
And it's like, no, what we mean is that this isn't a societal issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, female on female rape is a societal issue in the way that all forms of rape are,
hmm
but this isn't a trans cis divide.
Yeah. I mean, it's an issue that needs to be discussed on a wide range of topics. But when you start narrowing it down to just the trans issue, you're ignoring the bigger issue here. You're ignoring that rape is a problem, and that people are a problem. I think is probably the best way to describe it. All this article did was say, well, this happens a lot in all communities, but we're just going to focus on this community, and that it defeats the issue. You can't defeat the issue of rape if you're just going to narrow it down. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. Anyway, she concludes. Sorry for the interruption. Just putting this out there, because Lily Cade's repulsive tirade will be used to discredit the recent BBC article, which caused quite a stir, and I predict it will be taken down by that basis. I think
hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean,
at some point, eventually, maybe.
I mean, no offense. The article on its own merits is already discredited. Take Lily Cade out of the equation. Lily Cade not being in the article doesn't make the article any the less an awful piece of work.
I also like specifically the study that they cite is so problematic in the way that it's framed. It's very much considered I at least consider it such a sinister co-opting of actual lesbian issues.
Mm-hmm.
So in the article that that a lot of these sources came from, they asked, again, they didn't actually ask exclusively lesbians, but that's how I'll frame it. They
Mm-hmm.
asked lesbians a number of questions, and one of them was, as I've said, the decline of lesbian bars.
Yeah.
And I mentioned in my RuPaul's Drag Race video about that, in that
Mm-hmm.
we are losing these spaces and we're not gaining any other spaces really. Like, what tends to happen is, obviously, like, male dominated gay nightclubs become the norm, and queer bars also pop up, but there's a distinct loss of space for many members of the community. And they mention that as a lesbian issue, but they co-opt it into people are invading our women-only spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other issues. I know many trans inclusive progressive lesbians who personally do not like being called queer. I see it a lot, and a lot of the time I feel it myself, especially growing up in quite a working class environment
Mm-hmm.
where it is still used as a slur
Yeah.
among people that I meet. And I don't often feel comfortable calling myself it. I don't besmirch anybody who does. But if you ever wade into the murky waters of queer as a slur, it quickly becomes co-opted on one side, and it quickly becomes, if you talk about this, you are a TERF on the other.
Yeah.
And the waters tend to muddy where, when we talk about lesbian issues, a lot of people who don't understand the lesbian experience will then say, that's a TERF talking point.
Well, what gets me is that we are so drawn down by the whole semantics of the issue. I think Bill Nye said it best. The earth is on fucking fire.
Yeah.
Okay. But here we are arguing about whether queer is being co-opted by the LGBT community is a good or a bad thing. I'm like,
Yeah. I just don't have time for it anymore. When I'm just tired of everything. It's one of
yeah,
those things where I have the word is a slur on my Twitter mute list.
it's like I keep reminding people, because being a trans woman, when I go out, I tend to pass pretty well, which is, I really hate that word pass. And it makes me feel bad because other trans women want me for advice. And I'm kind of, I don't know. I was always androgynous. I'm intersex. It's something that's come with me. But I use the ladies' bathrooms now. First time around, I was scared to do it, but I do now. And I tell you what I see when I go into the ladies' bathrooms. I sit down on the toilet and I see a door. I see a door that says "engaged" in front of me. That's all I see. There's nothing for me to look at, And when they get out, it's not like somebody's flashing themselves at me or anything like that, And I don't have to worry about seeing boobs by going. I don't like swimming, so I'm not a big fan of swimming. I don't like changing rooms. Didn't when I was younger. Don't have to worry about boobs. I can see my own every day. Or my wife's every day. I don't have this problem. So why is this? They're making an issue out of something that really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know.
I think especially within like the recent year, I remember when it
Mm,
was quite American centric for a while, the idea of we need to police the bathrooms.
mm,
And I remember one of the first things that happened was that a cis butch lesbian was harassed and verbally assaulted.
yes.
And it's just like, does that not key anybody into it? Like, it's a lot. I feel like, in a way, a lot of transphobia is just butch phobia. Like, it's recycled butch phobia, the same way that, like, we would just see, oh, it's a woman who wants to be a man,
Well,
is how
it's
I
yeah.
see cis and straight people frame it throughout my life.
Well, I mean, like I said, I don't know if you're familiar with my intersex history. I mean, I posted about it enough on Twitter, I think, Um, for somebody like me, no, I'll be the first to say I don't know what it's like to be I don't have the growing up experience of being a woman. I have how I have perceived women and the women around me. But that's because as when I was brought up as a man, despite the fact that they're, despite the fact androgyny, intersex wise, I was more inclined to be a woman. I was just given male. What's the
Yeah.
word? Well, you know what I'm saying.
You were assigned
Yeah,
a gender at birth,
I
yeah.
was assigned a gender at birth. Therefore, I was given male icons to look up to, male examples to look up to. So no, I'm not going to be the perfect man who suddenly became a woman. That's not going to happen. I accept that. But the most important thing is I'm just trying to be me. I'm not trying to be you. I'm not trying to be any other woman. I'm not trying to live by how a woman is telling me how to be a woman or how a man is telling me to be a woman. I have to be comfortable in myself. And if sometimes it looks stereotypical, that's
Yeah.
society. Society has made that stereotypical. What am I supposed to do with that?
Again, yeah, it's a very cisnormative thing. I keep saying the word cisnormative. I'm pissing myself
Oh,
off
I
now.
don't care. I've reached a point where I don't give a damn about insulting them. It's.
But yeah, it's very much like I mentioned this in my video where growing up as a lesbian feels like growing up as not a woman. And it's one of the reasons that when I tend to think of myself, I tend to put woman last on the list. I think if people say gender is a spectrum and woman is here and man is here, I'm somewhere like up here.
Yeah.
Like just away from the binary is how it felt to grow up as a lesbian to me, because it was very much a case of otherness, being othered and being seen as not some very much a separation from gender norms. And like that sort of thing especially like hurts the intersex community so much, because we still in this country have intersex children who are I'm hesitant to use the word mutilation in regards to anybody's body, but for non-consensual surgeries, I think when people say that, like there is a point to it, but it's more just in reference to
Well,
anybody's bodies.
especially since the LGBT Alliance literally says, literally supports the view that intersex people don't exist,
Yeah,
or
they
that
just don't exist. They're like, no,
yeah,
we just choose not to believe.
or that the intersex issue has nothing to do with the trans community. And to a certain extent, I would agree. A lot of intersex people go through life without transitioning one way or the other. But there is an issue, especially with regards to me, where I was literally born both genders, both sexes. I had a hysterectomy about six months ago, where it does affect me. I was trans at birth. I was literally transitioned as a child, and my gender was assigned to me. I did, and that was it. And in many ways, I see an attack on the trans community as an attack on the intersex community, because eventually this is going to spill over. Once they've got what they wanted with the trans community, you think they're going to stop there? It's not. We are just basically the foundation for something that I think is going to be a bigger nightmare for the LGBT community as a whole. And I didn't put the T in there deliberately.
I think it's a level of normalization, because a lot of cis people who don't think about their gender or anybody else's gender at all, they've quite happily gone throughout their life without ever thinking about that at all, will look at LGB issues and they won't like it. In the past, they especially haven't liked it, and they'll just ignore it happily. But then when they're presented with trans issues, because it's visible, and they're presented with trans people's bodies, because they have that mindset that they have no, I don't want to say education, more like exposure to the communities, then it is incredibly easy to just go, this is a man invading women's spaces, especially in recent years. Like, I feel like quite a few years ago, not too long ago to remember though, trans issues were more seen, especially like in the public eye, as yeah, do what you like. because it was sort of a novelty. Like I remember like when I was like a teenager, me and a friend used to have this period where we would literally go out and we would watch random documentaries about random things. And there were quite a few that we watched, which was British media showing trans women transitioning, and there was never a but on the other side some people don't like this.
Mm.
It was just giving light to these women's experiences, whereas now they have to politicize it because clicks, money, political endorsements, and the ever looming threat of we have to be unbiased, which means we have to platform the opposite side.
Yeah.
So once it becomes a political issue, the BBC then goes, well, now we have to platform hate groups.
Yeah. I mean that neatly brings me on to the final point I'm going to be bringing up. But I think more or less you and I can agree that Rosa Dawn is a bit of a dick at this point.
Yeah.
You know, that was a pretty dick move
I
she
do
made. Yeah.
remember she was one of those YouTubers who was extremely obsessed with like Jessica and Eve, that sort of case,
Yeah.
where you can use one trans person as an example of how they've gone too far.
Yeah. It's but I think you and I mean, before we even started the interview, I think you and I can agree that the Terf community is going to take advantage of the Lily Cade community to try and gloss over all the other mistakes that they've
Yeah.
made. That's where I think they're going with this. Would you agree with that?
It's I'd so since I've been like posting a lot about this, and I posted my videos, the deleted comments that I've had to do,
Mhm.
where I will get people be like, why are you silencing these victims? And I'm
Yeah.
like, why are you silencing Lily Cade's victims? And in response to that, they won't address that. They won't think about that. They will
Mhm.
just go, disavow. We disavow Lily Cade. She's one person. One person alone did this, and I do not support her.
Lily Cade, like Donald Trump, didn't come out of the ether. She just didn't just,
Yeah.
you know, she's not an anomaly. She's the feature. And I think it's important for us, allies and trans people alike, to literally hammer this down. She is the feature. She is the feature. I mean, Donald Trump hasn't been shy about his feelings about trans people in the past. Do you think that the only reason he didn't go as far as he would like to have done? I mean, we're talking about the guy who wanted to put sharks with laser beams in the border between Mexico and do you think he could, if he couldn't do more to the trans community as president, he wouldn't have done it? Lily Cade is the Terf feature. She is basically what they really think, because at the end of the day, and I keep reminding the Terf community of this, there's only one way they can stop the trans community, and it isn't pretty. It isn't pretty. It ends in violence, and that's the sad thing.
The sad thing about that sentence is my brain went to liberation, and then I realized what you meant.
Yeah. For us, I would love to be liberated, but if they want to get rid of us, I think more V for Vendetta at this point.
Yeah, I think especially this country in particular, our we have a unique brand of imperialistic bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
So like we are still facing people who would threatened with deportation when they were from the Windrush scandal.
Yeah.
And it's very much well, we let you come into this country, but bureaucracy, it's a nightmare, we'll just have to throw you away. And it's very much the same in this regard. I think where it's when I say imperialism, I tend to mean like the specific sort of conservative mindset that even moderate British people often still hold, whether or not they acknowledge it.
Yeah, I mean, Britain has certainly become a test subject for an entire country's reaction to the other. I've noticed lately, whenever we speak about the Muslim divide, America has its issues with the Muslim community. But if you want to know how it's going to go, just look at Britain. That's what we all
Yeah.
say now. If you want to see, it's a test bed.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very much like I there are so many issues in Britain that feel like a microcosm where
Mm.
I know so many people specifically from Pakistan who face harassment because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is pretty much a result of um, during the 60s, I believe there was a big labor shortage. And so Indian and Pakistani people were invited over to help fill
Mm-hmm.
these labor shortages. And so obviously people emigrate over, and because the British communities are not kind, a self-segregation tends to happen where communities stay close knit, and then white British people on the outside go, well, they're segregating themselves, and they are, they're different and they won't integrate, is the big phrase that gets thrown
Oh,
around in Britain.
my favorite when I was a kid is don't walk in that area. The Sikhs own that area, or the Muslims own that
Yeah.
area. Or the black. Oh, this is owned by the black kids. And and I'm kind of, I'm
Yeah.
kind of that was,
You only have to look at how some people mention the Tower Hamlets. Like
yeah.
Tower Hamlets becomes like a sort of Tower Hamlets.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, you don't want to like. There's a very specific reason you don't want to go there. It's because of the immigrants. Is
Mm.
what they mean, and we'll get this in media. Like Piers Morgan and people will just say this, and because we just seem to have a complacency when it comes to dog whistling, we'll just allow it.
Yeah. Piers Morgan is an interesting. He's an interesting piece. Especially, I'm surprised that man is still in journalism after the stunt he pulled with the British forces, but that's another topic altogether. So, as a lesbian woman looking from the outside into the trans community, is it getting dangerous for the trans community over there? What is your perspective?
So, I've been doing quite a lot of work where I want to help victims of hate crime.
Mm-hmm.
I last year I started training to volunteer with a hate crime reduction initiative for my local area. Through a few reasons that hasn't quite actually panned out, and I haven't been able to actually start my volunteering role so much. But it's been something that I've been working on so much that you can only see the rise of hate crimes. And in my training, I still remember we were talking about specifically trans and gay issues, and um myself, I was the only lesbian on the course. There was a bi man on the course, and the instructor was a gay man. And he talked quite openly about the experience that victims of hate crime in this country get. One of them that he personally experienced in our local area was when the victim of a homophobic hate crime went to the police to try to report it. They laughed behind his back and called him slurs. And the sort of degradation that comes with this, and even especially in this country, as we like to pretend we have the greatest police force in the world, and we're so polite, we have those nice English bobbies who never do anything wrong, and
I worked on the
and
inside. I'm not going to say a word, but no, it's not true.
but yeah, we often have that perception, especially in the media, which is a lot of what we've seen challenged recently. And I tend to think that the media especially will trot out this hate for a minority, in the recent years, trans people,
Mm-hmm.
to deflect from recent topics, which is why I think this article came out now, when we are talking about challenging police powers a lot. And I, not specifically to credit the like it is a complete deflection of that, but I think it speaks to the fact that this article could not have taken a year to write.
Yeah.
It has to have been sitting for quite a while, because it's extremely basic and doesn't meet standards for journalistic integrity. I can't imagine how long they must have pretended to read over it.
I mean, do you think Brexit has contributed to this attitude?
I do think in a ways, like, there is a lot of like many of the people that I see are anti-EU. It's an anti-progressivism. Like, what they see as the EU isn't actually the EU. So, for example, I knew somebody who was in their 50s, and they said, before, in the good old days, before we joined the EU, I remember how good it was. And I was like, you were 8 years old when we joined the EU.
Yeah,
you just remember childhood. So you just remembered how good your childhood was before you had to think about social issues.
It astounds me, how people just don't know their own country's history. America's the same. I know more about America than the average American. I'm pretty sure that most Europeans know more about British history than most British people do. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, we'll conclude shortly, but I'm going to ask you for advice as a trans person from the UK. Do you think it's safe for somebody like me to go back to?
I think media portrayal is one thing. I think it's something that is heavily pushed. In my experience, if you find a community that you care about, it's a lot easier to not have to think about in terms of the actual, like, always find somebody supportive is what I'm trying to say there. Like, it's something that has affected my life so personally. Like, I have received pushback in my career for trying to help transgender people. And I have received pushback socially, and it's never from people within the LGBT community. And I think so it gets attributed to isolationism a lot, but like, actually finding your community can help so much. And I think especially in this country that is needed. And it's very difficult in this country, where we have an air of superiority, but what we act like, it never matches up to reality, is what I think there. We think, well, I am not like those American bigots who will take tiki torches and charge the Capitol building. We're not violent like that. Instead,
have they seen our football fans?
Yeah. I went to Paris pretty much immediately after the Euros, and they had devastated some of the commons areas.
I mean, I'm one of those people that, I'm not a fan of football, I'll be honest with you, never was. And I hated it every time we won at the Euro or the World Cup, because, my God, it was so unsafe to be out on the street. As soon as we lost, the entire city would go silent. And I'd be like, I'm going out. I'm going to enjoy myself, because it's so much safer when everybody's just so. No offense to football fans out there. I'm sure there's
everybody's inside, glued to the screen.
Yeah, I'm sure there are good football fans out there. But when you're depressed, I feel safe. Okay.
It's a lot safer to walk the streets when everybody's inside watching football.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I do appreciate you joining me here. I know it's probably 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock there now or something, you know. So
Yeah, it's actually only about 7:30.
I mean, so and I know it was such short notice, but I wanted to get you involved after seeing your video because I felt it was a very important contribution, and I knew you had a
Thank
lot
you.
more you could add to the you know, to the story than you already did in your video. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is Mars Nova. Her channel is highly recommended. Go over and support her and give her all the love and the subs you can. And I don't mean that in the kinky way. Okay. So, but yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out. I'll definitely be watching more of your work, and I really hope we can do this again sometime. You know, because
Thank you.
I really did enjoy our time together. Thank you so
Thank you. That'd
much.
be nice. I'm a little bit I'm a bit all over the place. My ADHD is like, well, this reminds me of a topic from.
Oh, it's okay.
So
I've had.
sorry for kind of diverging at multiple
Oh,
points.
it's okay. I've had interviews, you know, with you know, with people who have so much to say, and I'm going to keep this within an hour. I have interviews that have gone on for 5. You know, and don't get
And
me
then you
wrong.
have to edit them as well.
And don't get
That's
me
the
wrong.
worst part.
I love these people. I love talking to them, but I can't run a 5-hour interview, so I've got a lot of editing to do.
I'm
And
like,
then,
oh, sorry. Let me put away my notes.
yeah, and they know who they are, you know, and they know who they are, and they recognize this, you know. So believe me, you have been an absolute gem to talk to. So thank you so
Thank you.
much.
You've been
Thank you.
amazing. This has
Thank
been
you.
great.